Well, greetings from the chicken. They probably didn't tell you that chicken salesman was going to be here, right? Or you might have had other things to do this morning. I am delighted to be with you and tell you about our team's journey and some of the things that we've learned. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of backstory. I have been selling chicken a long time. It's been almost 40 years now. And I was actually lousy in the restaurant. I was a leader's worst nightmare. I escaped there without being fired and ended up going to the home office. Now, that's no reflection on the other men and women that work at the home office, but I couldn't work in the restaurant, so I ended up working at 5200 Buffington Road. And I walked in for an interview, and I told the receptionist I wanted a job working in their warehouse. So just a couple minutes later, Truett Cathy comes out and escorts me into his office. Now, you're probably wondering, why would Truett Cathy be interviewing a kid to work in the warehouse? Well, almost 40 years ago, Chick-fil-A was not the Chick-fil-A that you know today. I didn't know it at the time, but I was interviewing to be the 16th corporate employee. And by God's grace and Truett's benevolence, he selected me to work in the warehouse, and I quickly learned that I got to pull double duty, and I got to work in the mailroom as well. And so that's what I did in those early days, and it has been a fantastic journey. From my perspective, I have had trouble holding down a job. I worked all over the business. Every few years they say it's time to move this guy, and so I get to go do something else. But the story I want to tell you about today really emanates from a conversation that I had with Dan Cathy, Truett's oldest son, who is now our chairman and president. He was my boss at the time. He's still my boss, but he was my direct supervisor at the time. And he had been hearing about total quality management and all that was happening around the world. And he didn't say this, but I think he thought it sounded kind of complicated. He didn't like that part. But there was a piece of it, and some of you may know this, there was something called quality circles. And as he understood it, those were just teams. Teams that work to make things better. And he said, I want you to make us a team-based organization. Now that was in 1980-something. And that's when our team journey began. Because I said, walked in, told me that, I want you to make us a team-based organization. Some of you get that kind of encouragement from your boss too, don't you? Walk in, here's what you got to do. Yes, sir. I had no idea. I wasn't even sure what a team-based organization was, much less how to do it. But I said, I'll get started. And so what I want to share with you today, really at a high level, is what we learned over about a 20-plus year journey, trying to figure out how can we improve our business by strengthening teams. Well, first of all, you're ahead of us where we were back then, because it's my understanding you're already part of teams. We weren't part of teams. We had functions and departments, but they didn't meet any of the criteria that you or I would establish to say this is a team-based organization. So I want to tell you about that journey, and then we're going to try to end the time, in our brief time, with some real practical tips and takeaways that you might use to strengthen the teams that you're on. And I know that may not be what you're accustomed to in this setting, but they've asked me to go there and to remind you that there'll be an audio recording. If you hear something you think may have value of interest to you, you can always go back and get that recording. So we started that journey way back then and started trying to figure out why do some teams flourish and others flounder. Now, it's so funny because I had flashbacks, even as Dan gave me that assignment, that I'd always loved teams. I don't know about you, I was on teams since I was little. All kind of teams, and I'm sure many of you were on teams, whether they be sporting teams or debating teams or cheerleading squads. That's just kind of the way a lot of us grew up. And as I thought back, it really didn't help me at all, because I realized that every team I'd ever been on was lousy. Now, I wondered if I was the common denominator. I guess I was. But I had never played on a successful sports team in any sport, and I'd played them all, right? But it didn't matter because I loved teams. And so who knew all those years later that curiosity as a child would turn into a significant part of my professional story, as Dan said, figure out how to help us become a team-based organization. So we did what you would expect. We began to try things, and we began to pilot stuff, and we began to read things, and we began to benchmark other organizations, and we just really tinkered with this idea of teams for years. and years and years and years. And we would try to send it out to our restaurants. They're all independently operated, which is fantastic because we have that on-site leader and entrepreneur. But one of the byproducts of that is we do a lot of selling and not much telling. And so we'll kind of throw ideas out there, and we'll cast some vision, and we'll tell success stories and hope that they'll take up those ideas. And we were having trouble getting traction. And so we had tried this several times over the years, all the while trying to learn things that would make teams better. And so, about 5 years ago or so, I was asked to try and codify all that we had learned over that 20 years. And specifically, I was asked to write a book as part of a campaign to relaunch teams on a scale we had not. I mean, this way, we weren't going to dabble at it anymore. We felt like it was right for the business, and we were going to put a full court press. And so they asked me if I could codify what we learned and actually write a book about it. And I did. It's called The Secret of Teams, but I'll tell you more about that in a second. So what I want to do is I want to draw you a picture that represents the 20 years of learning. I want you to get ready, okay? It took 20 years to figure this out. I know you can't wait, can you? Okay, here we go. See, I made it simple. Something that if you chose to ever draw it, you could. If you chose to. Here's the deal. High-performance teams. Remember, some teams flourish and some teams flounder. Well, here's the truth. There are a lot of mediocre teams in the world. They're not floundering, but they're not flourishing. This is a picture of a high-performance team. That's the language we gave it because we found in our research and through our experience that there are teams like that. And if we had time and the forum and the setting was different, I could go around and ask you, think of high-performance teams, and you could name them, whether it be the Navy SEALs or the San Antonio Spurs, or I mean, you could come up with teams that they're not just good, they're really, really amazing. Well, those are the ones we studied all these years. We didn't want to study lousy teams, and we didn't want to study mediocre teams unless it was to learn what not to do, right? We wanted to know, what do the very, very best do? Here's what they do. They have some result that they're pursuing. I know this is deep, but we sell chicken, so don't expect it to be really deep, right? Like, if you're not trying to accomplish something, you're probably not a team, all right? So, they have results. The foundation is talent. Now, the team with the most talent doesn't always win, but it gives you a good shot at winning, right? Teams without talent rarely win. Sometimes teams with talent don't win. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it's foundational. You really have to have players to play the game, whatever that game is. And that's why I'm guessing what I know about you, you're rigorous in your selection standards. You're great people or you wouldn't be here. You could probably say the same at Chick-fil-A. We're crazy about selection. We think the most important decision a leader makes is who does what. Now, if you think that's profound, I hope you do. I didn't say that. Peter Drucker said that. The greatest management and leadership thinker since Jesus was on the earth himself. Peter Drucker said, the most important decision a leader makes is who does what. We actually believe that, which is why we're crazy about selection, and it forms the foundation for great teams. The second thing that all high-performance teams have are skills. Now, this, again, may be another blinding flash of the obvious. Don't expect something deep here, right? You invited a chicken salesman, right? It's skills. But here's the nuance that we discovered. There are two kinds of skills. Some teams flourish when they have good individual players with skills. I mean, there are a lot of famous examples. The U.S. Olympic team a few years ago when they won bronze with the best players. There was no skill deficit there, right? They had individual skills. And all high-performance teams have individual skills, but they have a second kind of skills. We call them team skills. You have to learn to work together. In the basketball example, you have to learn the plays, right? And in your setting, there's some skills that we'll talk about in just a minute. In addition to what you bring to the table as an individual contributor, and you do need skills, your team must have skills. Now, this is an important part of the presentation because all good teams have those three elements. Good teams. Not great teams. Good teams, they have talent and skills focused on results. What we discovered, which for us was kind of an exciting breakthrough, was that there is a third element in the teams that go and accomplish far more than is humanly comprehensible. And we've chosen to call it Community. Community. And this is about doing life together. This is about a place where people know each other and serve each other and love each other and celebrate and mourn. And I think it gives faith-based ministries, churches, and others a real competitive advantage. Now, I shared this one time with a group, and I had this gentleman. I love group participation, so jump in at any point. But it's a little disconcerting in a large group because you don't know if you're going to have a heckler, right? But I had somebody jump in, and he said, "Son," and he said it like 4 octaves lower than I can say it. So I stand up straighter when somebody calls me son, right? And he said, "Son, don't assume that the church has the community part figured out." And I said, well, I don't want to make that assumption, but I think we got the Holy Spirit helping us. If we'll pursue it, we can have it. It is not what keeps most teams from struggling. Now, this is parenthetical. I see a lot of, I've taught this content all over the world in all kind of ministries. I've taught for the International Bible Society and the Foreign Mission Board and the International Mission Board and on and on and on. I've taught it in churches. I've taught for the Willow Creek. I've taught it all over the world. And most faith-based teams don't miss it on community. They don't even miss it on talent. They actually miss it on the skill part. And so here's the power of this picture is it all works together. Because if you have talent and community, you just stand around singing Kumbaya, wasting kingdom resources. It's true. It's true. No, it's not here. I mean, you've been on teams in your churches and in schools and other places where you love each other and you're talented and gifted people and you don't accomplish squat. To me, that's a stewardship issue. That's another story too. But that's a skill problem, right? That's a skill problem. But what we've determined is when you put these together, you have something really powerful. Now, fun little bit of trivia. We started working on this, as I said, many, many years ago. In the early 90s, two gentlemen, Katzenbach and Smith, they wrote a secular book called The Wisdom of Teams. And I've actually since then had a chance to sit down with John Katzenbach, and here's what he said. He said, there's something that creates the rare, high-achieving teams. And he said, but let me tell you, as I'm reading this, he said, it's only going to happen once in a lifetime. And I'm thinking, once in a lifetime? So does that mean if you're on a team your whole life, that only once in a lifetime you could be on a high-performing team? So I've already got this frown on my face and in my spirit when I'm reading this. And I turn the page to read what he believes creates that. Secular researcher. He said, it only happens once in a lifetime that a group of men and women come together when they actually love each other, serve each other, and work together to help others win. And I'm going, well, it doesn't have to be once in a lifetime. And so we were already making it part of our strategy. So I go to meet with John Katzenbach, and I say, John, you're a genius, and you're like a thought leader, and I love you, but I think you missed it here. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, community is the turbocharger. This is what sets talent and skills on fire, right? But you said once in a lifetime. I think any leader who sets their heart and their strategic intent to create community can do so. He said, what makes you say that? I said, we've done it hundreds of times. And I've been in churches and schools and nonprofits, and they say part of our strategy for accomplishing our goals is to build community. And he said, that's interesting. I said, why is that? He said, it might explain why I've seen more high-performing teams since I wrote the book than I'd seen before. And I wondered how they were doing it. I said, it's because a leader has said this thing that you believe is random chance. They've said, we're going to define it and we're going to pursue it. He said, that makes a lot of sense. He said, oh, by the way, there is one more way you can build community. And I said, what's that? He said, you can survive a plane crash. I said, John, I said, people die in plane crashes. We want to build community without anybody dying. And I said, and I think you can. I know you can. Again, not as a substitute for talent, skills, and a focus on results, but you can pursue community. So, I write this book, and that's it. It explains that. And the book had been out days. And the first person of what ultimately became many people came to me and said, actually, the quote from one of my dear friends was, "This book is useless." And what are we taught when you get feedback? Thank you. Tell me more. I didn't work that hard on it. Okay, fine. He said, "It's just a concept. How do you do this?" I thought, that's a pretty interesting question. So then a few days later, one of our restaurant operators, because I've presented this to, at the time, several thousand chicken people at our annual event. A restaurant operator called me and he said, "We want you to come to our market and talk about high-performance teams." I said, "Fantastic." And he said, "Whoa, one thing." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Skip the talent, skills, and community part." I said, "What?" "What?" He said, yeah, that doesn't help us at all. He said, "You got to tell us how to do this." And so this chorus of voices began to build. It may actually be true. In fact, I stake my life on it. It's actually true. It's actually true. It's what Jesus did with the disciples. Think about this. Jesus gets to decide how he's going to structure his ministry. And he can choose any structure known to man, or he can choose a structure we've never heard of. And what does he do? Talent, skills, and community. They did life together, focused on kingdom results. So this is true. But in our organization, they said it's not that helpful. And some of you are going, "Yeah, I wish you could tell us something that would be helpful." So what I want to do in the couple of minutes that remain is I want to tell you what we did next. We said, okay, we've been studying this for 20 years. There are individual tactics that flow from this strategy. And so I'm just going to share some of them with you. And if they might serve you, you may take them on face value, or there may be other ways that we could partner with you. There are resources to support all this if you were interested. But let me give you a few. I'm going to run through a list. Again, these are not prescriptive, but they're descriptive. And we think that's important because you'll have to figure out what works for you. But we have been for 20 plus years going, what do the highest performing teams do tactically? So here's a list. One, again, not necessarily in order, but this is probably near the top, is they pursue a shared purpose. Teams where people are pulling in different directions on the road don't go very far very fast. And I think this is very, very dangerous, because sometimes well-established organizations can fall into this false sense of purpose. I'll tell you just one story. I was working with a faith-based organization. It's actually a church, to tell you the whole story. And they've been around about 175 years. And I'm meeting with their senior leaders. And I got this painful sense they weren't pulling on the rope in the same direction. And I said, "Hey, I got a question for you. How clear do you believe your purpose is as a ministry?" And one of the senior members said, "Son," and I'm thinking, okay, here we go again. I'm ready. He's going to set me straight. He said, "We were founded 175 years ago." I said, "Sir, I'm not questioning your longevity. I'm questioning your clarity." So I passed out 3x5 cards, and I said, I want everybody to write down why this ministry exists. If you're bold, you may want to try that at some point, even at the team level. Why does this team exist? They all wrote down stuff. I took them all up and I started reading. The first one was just eloquent. It was beautiful. It was brilliant. As was the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one, and the sixth one, and the seventh one, and the eighth one. And they were all different. You'll never be a high-performance team unless you agree on a common purpose. Number two, high-performance teams also pursue shared goals. That is the moment when a team becomes a team. It's not when you get the uniform. It's not when you sign the contract. It's not when the first day of practice starts. It's not even on the first day when the season begins. It's when a group of men and women come together and say, here is what we are trying to achieve collectively. You're going to embrace a common purpose. You're going to pursue shared goals. Shared goals. I got a new team at the office, and I freaked them all out because we're talking about performance management. And they said, what milestones are we going to have? And I said, we're going to set goals. I said, yeah, we figured that. Let me send you mine, and let me send you mine, and let me send you mine. I said, no. We're going to have the same goals. So what are you talking about? I said, we're a team, right? I don't want you chasing yours, and you chasing yours, and you chasing yours, and you not willing to help him, and you not willing to help her, and she's not willing to help him, because they're chasing their own goals. We got same goals. Teams pursue shared goals. They embrace a common purpose. They pursue shared goals. High-performance teams recruit talent. They recruit talent. Now, some people say in a volunteer ministry, that's hard. Well, that's hard everywhere. But the best teams recruit talent. And I know pastors that do this. I know small group leaders that do this. I know volunteers in ministry that do this. They look at what they need. If they don't have it, they go try to find somebody. Yes, they pray about it. Yes, they trust God. But my theory is, God feeds the birds, but the worms don't jump in their mouth. Like the mama has to go get them. And so I tell volunteers in ministry all the time, are you recruiting talent? What are the talent gaps you have on your team? And are you proactively seeking out talent? Are you recruiting talent? Another thing high-performance teams do is they have a team scorecard. Not only do they have goals, but they actually track. There's a stewardship component of that. There's a pragmatic view of that, because who wants to do the wrong things well? Right? I think that's another slippery slope. Because of who you are, and this is true with my team, we talk about it a lot. We have attracted people, and I'm sure you have people in this room, and you're going to give your very best, because you know Colossians chapter 3, and you're working for God, you're not working for men, and you're going to give it all you got. And guess what? You still get no credit for doing the wrong things well. So a scorecard helps determine, is what we're doing, are they the right things? Because if they are, they should be moving our key health indicators. So just a couple more. This one is painfully pragmatic, and pound for pound may be the best idea you're going to hear today. Not that I've set myself up here, but here we go. Great teams, high-performance teams, have outstanding meetings. You going, really? Yeah. Because meetings are those forums where you take the collective experience and passion and energy and intellect and spiritual gifts, and you bring it all to bear on the opportunities and the obstacles that your team faces. I still say a team is at their best when they're solving problems. Well, the meetings are generally the forum for that. Now, it won't all happen in those meetings. I understand that. But it's where you're encouraged, it's where you're challenged, it's where you're fed, it's where you're prayed for. It's one element of building the community. It's where you identify and solve problems. It's where you hold each other accountable. I mean, how good are your meetings? When I was leading volunteers in ministry, one of my roles over the years, I served on the church staff as a volunteer, senior staff as a volunteer, and I had a bunch of teams under me. And my goal was to make the monthly ministry meeting the highlight of their month. You're thinking, you want to know what I'm smoking, don't you? I'm telling you, you can set the bar as high as you want. Where else are they going to be encouraged and challenged and equipped and make a difference for eternity and do it in community? It can be a good, set the bar as high as you want. I knew I had arrived, though, at least for the moment, when people began to reschedule vacations not to miss our monthly meetings. You've created something where people say, I had to change my vacation because I'm not going to miss that meeting. Volunteers. High-performance teams, they have amazing meetings. I'll give you about two more. High-performance teams have role clarity. Now, this one has been fun for us in the chicken. Role clarity applies to the individual members of the team, but it's even more important when you clarify the role of the leader and the role of the rest of the team. So just one quick story on that. I had a leader approach me. It was kind of one of those bizarre moments. We're at our home office. I walked in the lobby. I see this restaurant operator, and he comes up to me, and he says, my team, they won't solve problems. And I said, how are you today? I mean, it's like he was amped up. I'm going, what? He said, I'm telling you, I've been trying to do this team thing, and my leaders will not solve problems. And I said, okay. And so I began to ask questions, which is actually an appropriate thing to do in that setting, but it was also because I had no idea how to respond in the moment. And so I said, well, give me an example. He said, yesterday, I showed up at the restaurant, and there was a problem. I said, what did you do? He said, I solved it. I said, okay. So let me go out on a limb based on this short diagnostic session. I think you got role clarity issues. He said, I've told them to solve problems. I said, but you're still solving problems. I said, so next time you see a problem, why don't you grab a member of your leadership team and say, come here. So we got two problems. One you see right over here, and the bigger problem is why I'm having to tell you. Because the way we set it up, I don't know if this fits you. The team is supposed to identify and solve problems. The leader is supposed to provide vision and values and boundaries and resources and encouragement. We want the team to manage their own work. If the leader manages the work, the leader is now a prisoner of the team. And then the team can't work unless the leader shows up, which reduces the span that a leader can lead. If you get these teams where they can manage their own work, you can lead a lot of teams because they're managing the work. So that's just one element of role clarity. We encourage high-performance teams to try and figure that out. So there are a few others I could share. Let me close with this one. I already referenced it. High-performance teams build genuine community. And it's not an afterthought. It's part of the strategy. It's part of what I think God put in all of us. We want to be part of community. Now, it will not all happen in meetings, but we've tried to establish the discipline that in every meeting there is some element of community building. And it may be as simple as, let's spend our first 5 minutes of sharing prayer requests. Or, tell me your favorite childhood memory. Or, what's your favorite food? You say, well, what's that do? Well, here's the magic of community. It's cumulative over time. And part of community is knowing and being known. Yes, it involves serving and being served and celebrating and mourning. But once you have to define it. You can't just say, we'll pursue community. And you've got to figure out your own definition. But once you define it, you can pursue it. So this celebrate and mourn piece that we've incorporated, you got to look for those opportunities. So when a friend of mine said his son was going to play junior high football, I'm going, no, that's a little bit different because his son was like 4. And he didn't say he's going to play high school football or college football. My son's going to play junior high football. Cool. And he talked about it all the time. It's a little weird, didn't it? It's a little weird. I don't know. And so, when do you play junior high football games? Thursday afternoon. So like 8 years later, it's Thursday afternoon. I'm leaving work early. Where are you going? I'm going to so-and-so's ball game. Well, why are you doing that? I said, because this is a big deal to my brother. It's a big deal to him. And I'm going to be there to celebrate with him. Whether the kid plays or doesn't play, scores a touchdown, sits on the bench, I'm going to hug their neck at the end of the game and say, man, I'm so excited for you. Because it was important to him. Now, on the flip side of that, we had a guy whose mom died. We got in the van. We drove 100 hours. We went there to the funeral. We came back, and it wasn't too much after that his dad died. Oh, gosh. Well, the schedule was such there's no way we could get there. I mean, it was like it was going to be humanly and physically impossible. And so we rented a plane the night before. We flew, went to the funeral home, hugged his neck, said we loved you, got back on the plane, went home. Somebody said, did you have to do that? Well, I've been to the weddings of both his daughters. Felt like I ought to be there to help him bury his parents. Rudy Giuliani says that weddings are optional, funerals are mandatory. When you celebrate and mourn with people, you make deposits. And you grow deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper in community. Community is the turbocharger on high-performance teams. So, I'll close with a question, and then I think we'll have time for about a couple from you. Is any of this biblical? Because somebody here may be asking that, and I have been asked that publicly and privately. I've been asked that during presentations, so you could have jumped right in. I've already referenced what Jesus did, but I think it's at the heart of why there are spiritual gifts and why you don't have all of them, and you don't have all of them, and you don't have all of them, because I think God counted on us doing it together. And he wanted different people to bring their own giftedness to the mix. I think it's why the model that Jesus chose. I think in a very elemental sense, it's all the way back in Exodus chapter 17 when Moses sent Joshua to fight the Amalekites, and he said, I'm going to stand up here and hold the staff of God. You go fight. I'm sure Joshua was jazzed by that. So you're going to do what? I'm going to stand on the hill with a stick, and you're going to go fight. Joshua said, yes, sir. You remember that story? As long as he held the staff of God toward heaven, the armies of Israel prevailed. And then what happened to Moses? You think he lost his faith? You think he's lost his competence as a leader? He got tired. Physically. He was human, and he felt the limits of his humanity. And no matter how hard he wanted to, he couldn't meet the obligations that would enable his army to prevail that day. The scripture tells us that Aaron and Hur came alongside. And they brought a stone for him to sit, and one was on the right and one was on the left, and they held his arms high. The armies of Israel prevailed. I think that's a beautiful picture of what teams do. We follow leaders. God has called us to follow leaders. The leader that you serve directly, the leader that serves that leader, and the leader of your organization. God has called you to serve and to advance the kingdom. And one of the many advantages, besides stewarding our talents and gifts well, is that when we form a team around our leaders, we have the opportunity for God's calling to be fulfilled and our ministry to prevail. And high-performance teams are the best way I know to win the day. So with that said, I think we've got about 5 minutes. Am I right? Help me, Bob. About 5 minutes for questions. I'll try to give short, pithy answers, if you have any. About teams or anything else. I'm sorry it took 2.5 years to get me here. I got to work on my calendar. Anything. Okay, let me do this. Let me give you my cell number. If it's on the screen, maybe we can, or maybe you'll just have to get it off the audio tape.
Let me ask a question.
Okay, good.
Do great teams always have great leaders?
Do great teams have great leaders? That's a thoughtful question. I would say yes.
And suppose you find yourself on a team and you are astute enough to decide that it's not a great leader.
Okay, if you're on a team and it's not a great leader, you have choices. I think my answer is you first have to figure out if that's God's call in your life, because He may have you there to learn things. He may have you there for a reason that is beyond your understanding and imagination. My personal bias, when I have rarely but occasionally found myself serving a leader whose leadership quotient was lower, I made it my chief priority to try and help them. I mean, it's always been my bias. The way we coach our people to be successful is to help your leader be successful. I turn it up when I find myself in those situations and say, okay, how can I help my leader be even better? Again, that's my general bias to start with, but when there's a gap, I'm really going to work hard. And then at some point you have a choice, which I believe is born in stewardship, and I've actually changed from one team to another, from one organization, volunteer ministry organization, from another, when I determined that I was allowing a leader to impede my kingdom impact. And I have actually changed because of that. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to stand before God for how I stewarded my life and my talent and my gifts. And after a season of trying to serve and lift up a leader, I have made the decision to actually make a move as a personal stewardship decision on my part. So that's a pretty complicated issue. I hope that might help think about it just a little bit. All right, I'm going to try this one more time because I think I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to turn on the air block. That's what they told me to do if we had issues. And since I don't know how to do that...
We have one more question.
Oh, good.
From our Periscope audience.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to throw the Periscope. A question.
We have a question from our Periscope audience.
Oh, good.
So how do you choose a good leader for the teams that you set up? So what do you look for in a good leader for those teams?
Okay. Well, that's a fantastic question. That's a big question. Here's the quickest I think I can talk about this is we think leadership is a lot like an iceberg. The 10% above the waterline are skills. And the 90% below represent character. We go on a scriptural basis for that. We look at Psalm 78:72, talking about David. It says, he shepherded his people with integrity of heart, and with skillful hands he led them. All we're trying to do is raise up a generation of leaders with skillful hands and integrity of heart. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're looking for when we put anyone in a leadership position. Now, we can all grow in our leadership character, and we can all grow our skills. We have to decide, based on the significance, magnitude, and urgency of the team assignment, how far back that leader can be. How gifted and skilled do they already need to be? Or based on the project or work at hand, can we afford to take an emerging leader and use this developmentally? But we're basically looking for leadership skills and leadership character. Hope that helps. All right, I think our time is up. They took my iPad away.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Okay. Okay, they've left the iPad. So.